Andy Vernon.
Andy Vernon.
Andy Vernon.
Andy Vernon.
So we're here with Andy Vernon.
Andy Vernon won't let them go.
I always had it in the back of my head.
Andy Vernon pushing.
You've got one chance to do this.
And this is a glorious effort from Andy Vernon of Great Britain.
I probably could cry. That was one of the darkest times I've been in my running career, actually. Yeah, I remember just having that news from John Rogers. And I was like, jeez.
You just knew at that point.
Yeah.
Andrew James Vernon is a British distance runner of legendary repute. He has competed at the Commonwealth Games, multiple World Cross-Country Championships, and represented Great Britain at the 10,000 metres in the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. On top of being an Olympian, Andy is a two-time medalist at the European Athletics Championships, landing a silver in the 10,000 and bronze in the 5,000. To give you a sense of Andy's calibre as an athlete, his personal bests are 13:11 for 5,000 and 27:42 for 10,000. At the time of recording, he is the single fastest runner I have ever spoken to on this podcast. To support the videos and podcasts produced by Jog On, check out our website. This is jogon.com, where you can buy all the Jog On running kit as well as our training plans, all of which have been carefully constructed with input from a GB athlete and a doctor of physiology, all to give you the best chance of getting the most from your running. Head to thisisjogon.com. Thank you. Andy kindly invited me into his home to talk with him about his remarkable career. A career that has been nothing short of a roller coaster.
That was by far the most nervous I've ever been for a race.
We discussed some of Andy's darkest experiences.
It was devastating for me, yeah.
Alongside those moments that made it all worth it.
Especially when you won those races.
Vernon comes out on top in the 2000.
I felt it was great.
And where it went wrong with his marathon debut.
I remember thinking to myself, look, if I can't get through a training run at like 5:17 pace for 23 miles, how am I going to go and run like 4:55 pace?
And then finally, towards the end of the episode, I ask Andy the big question. Is he done?
Is that it now, Andy? Do you think that you are drawing the line on the career?
So please, welcome to Jog On, Andy Vernon.
I'd like to bring you back to the early days, without wishing to sound boringly chronological, but take you right back to when you were doing a paper round around about age 14. And I understand you've already been doing a bit of running at this point, but it was on a Sunday paper round that you found out about Stubbington 10K.
Yep.
Well, looking back now, was that quite a significant moment when you entered that race?
Well, yeah, it was the start of everything, really. So I knew that I'd had talent for running just because of running with my dad, just doing little bits and bobs.
Yeah.
Going even back before then, I used to live in a different country, and there was like a very, very casual running club there that I used to join in with. So I knew that I had a little bit of talent for it, nothing to think that I would go on to do what I did, but I knew I enjoyed it. Yeah, so doing this paper round, they were just setting up the race start and finish area. I just kind of asked, is there a kids race? I didn't want to do 10K at that point, so I just asked, is there a kids race? And he said, yeah, I think there is. Called the house, phoned my dad and asked if he can just run me around in the car quickly and bring some running trainers for me and a pair of shorts. Did the race and won it. The local club, Stubbington Green Runners, asked if I wanted to join the club. I kind of beat, at that point there was a bit of not a star, but the best runner in the club, junior level. I beat him quite convincingly. I think he was a little bit annoyed about it, but
yeah.
That was on the Sunday. So the following weekend on the Saturday, I did the Hampshire League, and I finished third in the Hampshire League. And then the next day I did a Wessex League as well, and I won that one. Yeah, it kind of kicked off quite quickly then.
And it must be impressing upon you when you have these experiences as a kid. We know how impressionable as a young mind is. What were you feeling? Like certainly when you won that race at Stubbington 10K, or when you started doing well at the cross country, did you get a bit of a buzz off it and think, oh wow, I'm really starting to run all right here? I
did, yeah. I mean, it's always nice to do well in races, no matter what level it is. And the more you go on, the further into your career you go. As soon as you have goals, you always have goals along the way. As soon as you kind of reach that goal, you set your goal higher. Yep. And then so you constantly do that. I had no clue about racing. I'd never done a competitive race before. I just went out and going into a Hampshire League race that was 4.5K. I didn't really know how far 4.5K was. I didn't really know how long I was going to be running for. It was such a learning curve right from day one. And although I suppose that sort of level under 15, you're not exactly running against experienced runners. Everyone joins at some point, and probably under 30, they might have been doing it for a year or so. It was all just a stepping stone.
Yeah, which is probably a good way to approach it. What did you feel like you had that ability to do exactly? Do you feel like you had a natural endurance, or do you feel like you had some speed, or were you confident in your kick at the end? What was it that was happening? You're thinking, oh, this is what I've got. You felt like powerful as a runner, or you had the endurance?
Yeah, it was very much the endurance, yeah. I had very little speed and power at that. I was very scrawny. If you ever dig out, there probably aren't any photos available, but I've got a few photos of me when I was an under 15 and under 17. I was very thin and scrawny, and you probably wouldn't think it now because I've always been, as a professional, I've always been that bigger runner that...
the shoulders emerged eventually.
Exactly, yeah. The kick was probably my worst bit, and it's funny how times change, because that actually probably became my best attribute actually towards the end of my career. I actually got to the point where when I was a kid, I used to really look forward to a Parliament Hill, something that was boggy and muddy and hilly, because it would slow everyone else down, and I would do better at those courses. It was my endurance and just the harder courses that were my stronger suit. I was sort of overseen by Penny Force at Aldershot Farnham District, along with a couple of other coaches as well. And then I changed coaches to Nick Anderson, and at that point, I felt like I was kind of just a bit more ready to put more effort and time and dedication into training. And there's nothing against Penny. She actually used to set me more training than I just didn't do it. I didn't really have much interest in doing that and going out and just going for a 20-minute run. I had no interest in that. It wasn't until I got a bit older and went on a training camp, a young athletes training camp, not too far away from here, actually, in Crowthorne. And Nick was one of the head coaches there. And I just saw everyone else training and how much they did. And I kind of thought then, well, actually, maybe if I want to actually be any good, get to the point where I really would like to be winning medals at nationals and the national and inter-counties and things like that, I'd better start doing these sort of things. So that all happened at the same time.
Looking at the Andy Vernon timeline, I tried to sort of pinpoint what that moment was when you could argue that maybe you'd taken it from turning up at training, having fun with it, but not taking it so seriously, to all of a sudden being like, oh, maybe I will actually start taking this quite seriously now. And it looks like maybe possibly that training camp you just mentioned with Nick, and maybe the move from Penny to Nick is a bit of a turning point where you start to ramp it up a little bit. Not because of, often we mistake it for a coaching reason, but sometimes it's just the athletes you surround yourself with, and it's that standard that you put yourself around. So once you were with Nick, did you find yourself higher standard of training because you were simply up with faster runners, and did that bring your training on?
I mean, it certainly did help. With Stubbington Green, I used to train a lot with the seniors at that point. I kind of moved on from the juniors, and I used to join the seniors in their training sessions. And then when I moved to Aldershot, then it's just a different club to Stubbington. It's there's a lot. The standard is kind of far greater, and just training with better people. Yeah, obviously it does help you. It does bring you on, but the overall, bringing my mileage up, I think that's the thing that was the major turning point. And at that point, I still didn't really have any sights on sort of Great Britain teams. I didn't really know what I could or couldn't do. Again, if I go on another couple of years, I remember there was a Liverpool Cross Challenge in, I think it was 2003, and I drove up with a very good friend of mine, James Ellis, training partner at the time, and Nick. Driving up was okay. Driving back was when we had this conversation, and I remember Nick talking to James about who had made the team. I was listening to him thinking, what do you mean made the team? Like, you keep on saying made the team. What are you talking about? What's made the team? What team? And Nick kind of looked at me and said, did you not know what was on the line today, Andy? And I said, no, what was on the line? He said, well, the guys that finished in the top 6 today, they all get to run for Great Britain in the European Cross in 2 weeks' time. I finished 17th, so I don't think I was ever going to do that anyway. But I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, he's like, I can't believe you didn't know that. And I was like, oh, no, that's not the level I'd been at. I'd only been training with him for, at that point, I think I started with him in October, and this was like November, the trial, something like September to November. And I said, it just wasn't really ever in my sights. I didn't think you could do that. And so I just said, well, when's the next time you can run for Great Britain? What's the next thing? And he said, oh, well, it'll be the inter-counties in March, and then you get to run in the World Cross Country Championships. And by this point, this was 2004. Put my head down a little bit, and I finished 4th in the trial and made the World Cross teams.
A big telling sign of an athlete, partly, is how well they're going to do. We always talk about endurance and strength and how fit they are and their physique and like what are their natural gifts and how hard do they train. But people don't realise often that a huge part of it on that start line is how relaxed a runner can be and how calm and how much they deal with the pressure of the moment. And especially when you start getting to those big levels, all the build-up, you've been flown out out somewhere. Once you've got a GB vest on, that means something more. How were you, do you think, compared to other runners at handling pressure? Because in my research, you've always seemed quite chilled out, quite relaxed. Perhaps you just have a poker face and internally it's like, but you've always seemed like quite a chilled out runner, and you seem to have had an advantage, I would say possibly, that you are able to, the example there being you weren't even aware at the time of, I didn't know that there was qualification places up for grabs. How good do you think you have been mentally in those younger years?
Yeah, well, it was a fitting question to come after this, my story about the World Cross, because that was by far the most nervous I've ever been for a race, purely because it was the only time I'd ever gone into a race, and it still is the only time I've ever gone into a race and thought, geez, if I have a bad one today, I could finish last. And not that there's anything wrong with finishing last, it's just that I never wanted to finish last in a race. Obviously, I'm a competitive racer, so you always want to do as well as you can. But I kind of thought, God, if I just have a bad race, and I remember going on the coach, and I just wanted to throw up the whole. Luckily, it was only about 12 minutes or something like that to the course, and I just remember just wanting to throw up the whole coach journey, just being that nervous, and my stomach was in bits, and that was a horrible feeling. I remember that being quite a horrible feeling, and once I started warming up, I was a bit better. I just started to think, look, you're probably not going to come last. I knew what other people had done like Brits had done in the previous races. I did a bit of research on it, and I thought, you'd have to have a terrible race to come last. So just think about the positives. You're here, you're healthy, you can run well. It kind of helped me a lot though, being that nervous for that race, and then going on and finishing well inside the top half, or the first half of the race. It helped me a lot, because I learned that you don't need to get nervous. You don't need to worry about these things. Just it taught me to enjoy it more than anything. I thought, like, if you're going to do this, it is good to be nervous, because it means you care about your results. You understand what you're going into, or the
magnitude of it.
That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, the magnitude of what you're about to do. Yeah, at the same time, you do have to enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't want to continue doing races and feeling like that. Not even learn. I just didn't feel that nervous after that. I just thought, nothing is going to be as bad as that day. The only times I really got, I suppose I got a little bit nervous, 2014, when I turned up, and I knew that I was in good shape for the European Championships. Not so much nervous, but I always had it in the back of my head, is that you've got one chance to do this. You've got this race, this particular race here, when you're in shape, and you've got the chance to do well. You're only going to get one shot at it. And it was that thought of, there's plenty of times when it's out of your control that, your legs just don't feel very good, or you have a bit of stomach cramp, you get a stitch, that it could be anything during the race that you've got no control over. And you just kind of think, I really hope that doesn't happen in this race, because I don't get this opportunity again. Yes, there are other races in the future, and the European champs do come around every 2 years now, but it used to be 4 years back then. You don't always turn up to these races in the best shape of your life, and you could make the team for the next one, but you're just in not so good shape. So when there's those chances of the races that really do mean a lot, it was just that thought in the back of my head that you only get this one shot to do this race, and don't mess it up. But generally speaking, I would go into them relaxed, as you said. Yeah, it wasn't a poker face. I generally was quite relaxed, and I always tried to converse with people. I didn't lock myself away in my own thoughts with headphones in, and because then you're more thinking about, like, the Olympics, for instance. There was an hour journey to the stadium, so it's a long time to be like, if you're thinking about the race and you go in there 3 hours before your race is about to start. It's a long time to have those thoughts going through your head. So yeah, it's better just to. I just try to chat to people.
Chill out a bit. I think all too often we do see an athlete who looks back on their career and probably looks back with a little bit of resentment, not resentment, but like a little bit of regret that perhaps they were so focused in those moments and possibly so nervous that they haven't created possibly the most positive memories from it. Because as much as anything, it's just having those conversations and just like you said, just trying to actually soak it in a little bit, because you can have that tunnel vision and be like, I barely remembered that. It was just I was in a washing machine and then it's over.
Yeah.
And like you say, you had that one shot, so you might as well enjoy it, as well as being incredibly competitive and doing your best, but you have to soak it up a little bit as well.
Yeah. The best thing about that is you can be really nervous before a race, and even towards the end of my career, there were still races that I got a little bit more nervous than I would have liked. But it's after you do those races and you finish it. I remember finishing some races and just going, I want to go and do that again. But it was the races where you finish well, you do run well, and it was a great experience, and you win a medal or whatever it is. And I remember quite a few times just finishing races and just immediately just thinking, I want to go and do that again. That was amazing. Like, that was amazing. Like, when you have a massive last lap or something like that, and it's a big sprint down. There's quite a few times that, and I just kind of think, oh, what did I ever get nervous about? Why was I nervous in that race? Because once you're in the zone and you're racing, 9 times out of 10 you do run well.
When you're racing, in that moment, so the gun's gone, let's say 2,000-3,000 meters into a 10,000 race on the track, do you tend to have a sense at that point, as Andy Vernon, the athlete, as to how that race is going to go? Or is it not until you finish the line that you have no idea what your legs could pack up at any point, your breathing could go weird, someone could pull out something strange? Or do you feel more relaxed a couple of Ks in because you just have that internal sense of, okay, this is how I'm feeling this race?
Yeah, I tended to go through a few stages. So right on the start line, sometimes I'd have that last little bit of like, right, this is it, you're here now. And they'll be like, come on. And you have that last like gasp of like, you need to try and then as soon as the gun goes, you're running. That's it. It's like, it's gone. And you're just running then. Yep. And obviously at the start of races, you're normally running quite comfortably within yourself. Then it gets to the point where you know you're getting to the business end of the race. And for me anyway, I always used to just get that point, or we're about to get to the point where we're winding it up, and then you're just watching everyone and you're looking for the moves, and that's when I probably if I was to ever get nervous during a race, it would be that point. It'd be the point where you know, like, right, this is it. It's going to start hurting now, and you're going to have to dig deep to get where you want to be in this race. I used to look at the clock a lot because I knew how I should feel at certain paces, and I'd be worried if like we ran a 68 but that felt hard, or you'd feel great if you just run a 64 and that felt comfortable. So it was more also just to give me a bit of a gauge as to like, how am I feeling right now running this pace with still 7 laps to go. And so it was I used to try and gauge my efforts with the clock, but every so often the clocks used to break, they used to stop, and so you didn't have that. But I'd always be aware of what sort of paces I was running.
Andy, this is a tricky question, I think. You may find this easy. I've always found this difficult. But if I could split your career into the 3 big surfaces, if you like, which you could arguably separate into road, cross-country, and then track. If you were talking from just a pure passion perspective in terms of where your heart lies, in terms of your best experiences, what you've enjoyed the most, and also where you've perhaps found some success in particular, of those 3 surfaces, what are you fondest of?
I never thought I'd say this, but it probably is the track. I always thought that because of my early experiences with the track, well, they weren't really any experiences with the track, it was all cross country. I always thought that I was going to be much more of a cross-country runner than I was track. But as I matured as a person, going through puberty and growing and getting bigger, I just evolved on the track. I found that power and I found that speed. I just preferred running on the track, I think, in the end.
Is that slightly the arena setup, the stadium, the atmosphere as well? Or?
I love cross-country, don't get me wrong. I do love cross-country. It's just that, you have to bring about 4 sets of spare clothing with you because you don't know what something to warm up in, something to race in, something to warm down in, sometimes something to go home in. It's generally speaking, the track was it was just warmer. It's the summer. It's in terms of just the pure racing as well, that last couple of laps, even if it was a last really hard last K, I just used to love that build up to that last lap, and then just giving it everything you had, especially when you won those races. I felt it was great because you've got everyone in the stadium there watching you.
You can watch the story unfold from the start line to that finish line as well. You're right. It's that setup. It's almost something more gladiatorial. It's in a weird way. It's kind of like the purest form of running because it's the most pressure bowl situation. It is a goldfish bowl of all eyes are on you making those moves, and everything is a bit more scrutinized. I've spoken to runners on here who've said that they actually barely touch the track because of that. They just find it too much. Like they find it quite stressful. But that's interesting. I thought you might say cross country, but yeah.
I always thought that I would prefer the cross country, but thing is, it's different because the cross country is just bare grit as well. It's especially when you've got a race, it's bad conditions, it's muddy, and you haven't just got the guys you're racing to compete against. You've got the course to compete against as well, and you really are. Some of the cross country races I did, you really are battling against the elements and battling against the hills and the mud and just trying to stay on your feet. There were some races with cross country that went a bit too far, and they become so muddy that you don't really feel like you're running. You are literally just trying to stay on your feet, even with 50mm spikes in there. There were the times when even like running things like the intercounties when it was so boggy and muddy, and I'm like, God, this is like the best cross-country race in Britain, and I feel like I'm jogging. Like I felt like I was running 6.5 minute miles. I might have been running 6.5 minute miles. Like who knows? I'd never had Garmin's on when I raced. That for me was a bit sort of underwhelming, but I just couldn't do it because you try and run any faster and you're falling over. That was the bit of cross country sometimes that I didn't like when it just got too much. there was too much mud, and he just felt like you couldn't actually put a show on.
Yeah. You can't lean into your abilities quite as much sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you say, the speed. One of the worst things for me is watching footage back of me running cross country, because I look like I'm basically walking. And in my head, I was like, I think I'm moving quite well here. But you really are trudging through the mud, and you look back and it's hard to pick out elites quite as well in cross country, because the pace is just, some of those hills in the mud, the pace really is quite pedestrian. I couldn't not ask you, Andy, while sitting here about, it's a huge subject that you couldn't possibly, we have to glaze over to even touch on it, but being a professional runner, being full-time as a runner, and just to ask you what that experience is like, really, because most people never get to experience that. And I think people look from the outside in and think it's all sunshine and rainbows. And for example, people might not be familiar with the fact that even in 2013, there was a point when you were even coming quite close to retiring. Can you talk me through the thought process back then, and kind of what that journey's been like a little bit? What led to 2013 and the kind of potential to retire, but then how you can have race appearance fees turn up and all of a sudden a sponsor can sweep in and pick you up again? Because the sport we're in, let's be honest, there is just not much money to be had unless very certain boxes are ticked. Yeah. So yeah, can you talk me through 2013 and what that was like, and why you nearly came to retirement at that point?
Yeah, so I'd had, it was 2012 that I had the injury that basically kept me out of the Olympics.
Was this a foot?
Yeah, there was a stress fracture in my navicular bone. Can't remember what leg it was. I think left. But because of the Olympics being in London, I raced a couple of times when I shouldn't have probably raced on it, and I made it. I got it, so I basically did a 5K and a 10K within a couple of weeks of each other in America on the stress fracture. That was in just desperate desire to qualify. Being in California, the races, the way that the races are set up, they're probably your best chances you're going to do to run qualifying times. I was stuck between this: should I race them or should I not? And I was like, what if I race them and I got the qualifying time? All I've got to do, I'm basically there. All I've got to do is try and get my foot fixed, and I'll be okay. Sadly, I missed both qualifying times very, very narrowly. It was about 2 seconds for the 5K and about 4 or 5 seconds for the 10K. I was very, very close. And anyway, that finished me off for that season.
How did you handle that mentally? Like, was that a down period?
That was one of the darkest times I've been in my running career, actually. Yeah.
Because it's London, because it's the home games.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's Olympic Games. They only come around every 4 years. You're not guaranteed. There's no guarantees that you'd go to the next one. You know, how many people get to run Olympic Games in their own country? It was devastating for me. Yeah, it really was.
How do you pull yourself out of that dark period?
I had to take some time off anyway because of my foot. I did at that point. I wasn't even interested in cross training. I don't think I was. I was in such a low point. I wasn't on suicide watch or anything like that. But I remember thinking to myself, if there was ever a point in my life when I'm going to cry, other than someone dying, like close to me, it will be now. Yeah, this is the one time that I probably could cry. If I really wanted to, I probably could cry. And I remember just having that news from John Rogers, and just he was like, I got the phone call, and he's like, it is. I'm really sorry, Andy. It is a stress fracture, and you're going to be out for a good 12 weeks with this one. And I was like, jeez.
You just knew at that point.
Yeah. At that point, it was gone, because I couldn't. I already knew that I couldn't run anywhere. I couldn't. It was quite painful at that point. Even
so, you must have been about 26 at that time, something like that.
Yes, yeah, I was 26. Yeah, I was just in this kind of like rock bottom. Just trying to get out of this injury spell. And at that point, I don't think I was sponsored by any. I think that was the only year that I didn't officially have a kit sponsor, and so I didn't have any income. And I was living in London at the time. My rent was $11.50 a month.
This is in Teddington, is it?
Yeah, Teddington. It was quite a lot of money that I had to find every single month. I had a bit of savings, and it was just my savings were going, and I didn't have any income.
It's a panicky situation, really. Things are drying up, and you're like, what's my next move?
Yeah, exactly. And I was just, what am I going to do? I can't continue to do this if I'm not earning any money out of it. Like, I can't be a full-time athlete and not do any races, not earn any money. I ended up getting a job nannying, just like looking after kids after school, and that kind of got me through. I had 3 jobs at one point.
Bartending?
Bartending in the evening. So I used to come home about 7 o'clock, do an evening run. I lived opposite Constitutional Club, and I used to go in there from like 8 till 11. Yeah, and then at the weekends, there was a cricket club, Teddington Cricket Club in Bushy Park, and I would do some shifts there as well whilst they were doing their Saturday games.
That's a hectic time. And some of those days, I'm guessing you're doing double runs as well.
Yeah, pretty much all of them. Yeah.
Well, it's just that's a crazy schedule. It's amazing you were able to keep all that going, really.
Yeah. So at the time, I was living with a guy called Sean Fontana, and he couldn't get his head around. He was just like, "You are one of the best runners in Europe, and you're having to work 3 jobs to keep yourself going. He said, I think that almost made him want to. He was just like, what hope have I got if this is what you're doing? They did help me. It was just something I'm not opposed to grafting. For me, it was just a means to an end, and just what I needed to do at the time, because I didn't want to end my career not being an Olympian. That for me was
the big box to tick.
Yeah, I wanted to at least be an Olympian. Yeah, that was like the biggest goal, because that was, even when I was a kid, is become an Olympian. Even when I was like 15, 16, that was pinnacle of the sport. I did compete in the Olympics, but just not quite as well as I would like to. So it was a bit of a bittersweet thing for me, because I just didn't run as well. But until I got the job, in 2013, I was at the point where I was contemplating just stopping altogether. Luckily, I managed to get these jobs that all fit. I could do all my training in the morning, or an early afternoon gym session, whatever it might be. I could do that as long as I was at the school at 3:15 to pick the kids up. I just need to get all my morning training done by then, which is fine. I could even have an afternoon nap, then work for 4 hours in the afternoon into the evening, come back, do a run, then go over to bartender for a few hours. I made it work. In the end. Latter end of 2013, I managed to get myself into some really, really good shape, and that's when I won the medal at the European Cross. And then the following year, had the 2014 season, which was arguably my best season. So I was, the relief that I had. I remember finishing some of those races and just thinking, God, I almost gave up last year.
You must look back in hindsight and go, wow, I'm really glad I actually pushed through and picked up, because it paid off, because you had 2014 season, because you got to Rio. You must look back and think, yeah, exactly. That was one of my questions. Like, do you look back and think, dear Lord, I came quite close there. I'm glad I didn't pull the plug, because there was a lot more to be had.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you never know what the future holds for you. So I could have carried on and not done anything, but not won any medals and not gone to the Olympics. It could quite easily happen. But for me, it was just that what if.
And you're in prime age, so you didn't have an age excuse on or anything like that.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was literally, because that's the other thing as well. I was thinking, as a distance runner, I haven't really even hit my peak yet. I was still only 26 or 27 at that point. And I was like, I'm just about to start coming into those, like, the best 4 years of my life.
The glory years, yeah.
You're kind of fully matured, but you're not over the hill. Yeah.
Well, I think on the age subject and distances and endurance, I think that leads us nicely onto a chat about the marathon and a big goal of yours towards the end. I wrote down a quote because I thought it was relevant from fastrunning.com. The marathon remains the jewel of the road racing crown for the majority of endurance athletes, and after much success on the track and in the mud, Andy Vernon is ready to step up to the distance. I think they wrote that in something like 2019. I may have got the year wrong there. So for people who don't know, you at this point turn around and go, well, you've got a half marathon, you've got a 62 half marathon, you've obviously got the endurance, proven yourself in all these different areas. It seemed like the next logical step was, well, let's have a look at London. Just talk me through sort of a brief storyline of how that happened and how it ended up not happening for you.
Yeah, so, I mean, the transition was 2019 at this point. I'd run my 5K PB 5 years earlier. I'd run my 10K PB 4 years earlier, yeah. So 2014 and 2015, 5K, 10K. At that point, I was kind of thinking, I'm probably not going to run any more PBs on the track at those distances. I wanted to get in a marathon before I was over the hill. I wanted to try, still within the realms of my prime, I still wanted to try and get in a good marathon. So that's when I just, I chatted to Nick Badeau, was my coach at that point, and I said, I would like to give the marathon a go. I think he always thought that I was a bit too big for the marathon, a bit too heavy, but I kind of had that sit down with him and said, I'm not getting any faster on the track. Let's just, what have I got to lose? Let's just give it a go. So I did that and got a place in the 2019 London Marathon, and somewhere along the line, I picked up hamstring tendinopathy. I'd had it a couple of times before, but this one I really kind of took it to the limit.
Why is that? Because is it denial? Is it it's there, but it's just you think it's worth pushing through on it, or are you just dialing everything back to 85 mile rather than 110 mile weeks? Like, how are you handling it? How are you managing it?
It was the opposite, actually. I was going up to 130 mile weeks, and I was doing some days. I was doing 22, 23 miles like consecutive days.
God, those are big weeks.
in one run as well. I remember I did a hard run training session and then like a long run the next day, and that was a difficult time because I was cut between, do I just make this better and just pass on the London Marathon, or just wait for a new one, or do I just try and keep going? And I kind of thought, I'll keep on going, and there was one training run where I think I was trying to do 22 miles I averaged about 5:17 pace or something like that in a 130-mile week.
And that's the thing, in the context of 130-mile weeks, even more insane.
Yeah, and I remember getting to the point where I was about 19 miles in, and one of the first ever times that in training I just stopped, and my hamstring was really, really hurting. But also I felt like I was hyperventilating. Oh, wow. And I think because of the pain was so big at this point, I was like, my breathing was going, like I couldn't really breathe properly, and I felt like the only way I can describe it is hyperventilating. That's kind of how I felt like I was, and I just had to stop, and I just thought, right, just calm down, just get yourself. And I sort of stopped for about a minute, maybe a minute and a half. And then I just thought, all right, just get to the end of this, just run home, just get it done. And I managed to finish it. So I still did another 4 miles after, I think it was. At that point, I kind of thought, you know what, can I really do this? Can I really race this marathon? I was about 3 weeks out, I think. I remember thinking to myself, look, if I can't get through a training run at like 5:17 pace for 23 miles, even though I'm doing the miles around it, I was like, how am I going to go and run like 4:55 pace? 2 or 3 miles in, it was starting, I could feel it. There wasn't really much of the run that I couldn't feel something. Obviously as time went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. I don't want to have to stop, and I don't want to just jog it in. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to, if I'm going to do a marathon, I want to be able to do it properly. I want to be fresh. So I made the decision, quite a hard decision, to pull out of that one.
Because there was appearance fee money with that, and
it was a lot.
There was a lot of things.
There was a lot of money on that one. Yeah,
you're saying no to a number of things there.
Yeah, there was a lot. By far, the biggest payday I'd have had if I'd run anywhere. If I'd run sub 2:10, it would have been a lot of money. Yeah, there's time bonuses, there's the appearance fee, there's the top 12 in the actual race. There was loads of avenues of money to earn in that race. I ended up entering New York Marathon in November of 2019, so still the same year. But I kind of got over the hamstring tendinopathy, but I had to not train for a few months. I stopped that race. A couple of reasons. One, I think I really messed up on my gels and the drinks. I think I just took too much on, and also the very hard roads, they're pretty much poured concrete, and there's not much rubber or bitumen in their roads. It's just very, very solid. Gave me a really bad, felt like I had a stress fracture in my femur. And about 15 miles, you go over, it's pretty much all uphill, and for about a mile, it's a long bridge, and then it kind of shoots down. I remember being okay going up the hill, but then as soon as it shot down and did a U-turn, it was the running downhill that was like, it was really, really bad. I remember dreading going down the hills and actually welcoming the uphill.
Right, yeah. That's a weird situation to be in the middle of a marathon.
Especially when you're at this point, it's 17 miles into the marathon or something like that. And I remember just like getting to the top of the hill thinking, God, I've got to go down this hill now, because that was hurting the quad. And then getting to the bottom and going, I can go back uphill now. It's not going to hurt so much.
What an odd situation.
And, very, very odd. And I don't think many people would have that. And about 18 miles, I really needed to go to the toilet. My quad was, and I just thought, God, I've still got 8 miles to go. I kind of thought, live to fight another day. I pulled off, and I just had to go I pulled off where there was some toilets, had to go to the toilet. And annoyingly, really, really annoyingly, I was in there for so long, I missed the sweeper vehicle that came round. And it took me about 45 minutes to get back to the start line. I might as well have just finished the race anyway. Yeah, I had to go across and run all the way through Central Park to get to the finish. Yeah, I might as well have just finished the race.
Just followed the course in.
Yeah,
at
exactly.
Point. Yeah. There's a weird part of an elite athlete's career. You see it sometimes as a guy just in short shorts, but clearly with a race number, etc., or their name on. They're just sort of wandering, and they've clearly pulled out, and they're trying to find the sweeper vehicle. And
exactly.
That's a weird part of it.
Yeah, because I probably waited for about 10 minutes, and it just wasn't. And I remember when I was in the toilet, I remember hearing something come past, so I had to find my way home. But that, unfortunately, that was pretty much the start of the end of me, actually. I wanted to do London in the following March, but that was 2020, and we all know what started.
That's out of your control at that point. So
yeah, exactly. Just never really got fixed, and I'm still suffering with them today. That's what ended my career, really. It's my calf. And to this day, it still hampers me, and I can't really go much more than an hour at the moment. Doesn't like me running up hills. So it's that was the end, really.
You were in Stirling for a cross-country race some years back, and you saw Paula Radcliffe there. You'd spoken to her about marathon stuff. Did she give you any advice at the time?
Yeah, she did, actually. Yeah, I basically asked her what she did for her training. Being one of the best not only female marathon runners, but she's actually probably one of the best. That the year that she ran her world record, she was the fastest British person.
Wow, that's crazy, isn't it? April 2003 it was.
Yeah, to think that she was the fastest Brit, it's kind of unheard of. But yeah, she obviously had vast experience of running marathons and training for marathons. So yeah, I just picked her brains and just said, what did you do? And yeah, she gave me the idea of I think she did it every 10 days. I think she did a cycle of every 10 days. I think I ended up doing it every 2 weeks instead of being my first one. I didn't want to I didn't want to overcook myself. I probably did, but just going out. She said, just do a mile warm up, just run, and then run. She asked me what time I would be looking to row or pace, and she said, run like 10 to 20 seconds slower than your target marathon pace. Just start off doing 18 miles, and then do 20, and then 22, and get up to about 23, 24, something like that. So yeah, that's what I did.
Is that it now, Andy? Do you think that you are drawing the line on the career, and you think that you're 37 now? Do you ever see yourself coming in just having in your mid 40s and having another crack at a marathon or something, just to test the water and see how you feel? Or
I mean, it's not out of the question. At the moment, the thing that's stopping me is I just can't get any decent amount of training in. That really limits me to what I can do. And actually, back in November, I tried to do a Hampshire League. I started it, but I had to pull out because my calf just gave way. And ended up not running for about 6 weeks after that. Actually, it's kind of put me back by quite a bit. And I thought I was actually going into that race. My calf was in a decent place, like probably one of the best it's been in, and then that just kind of ruined it. So I'm happy with what I've done in my career, and I'm happy with where I did leave it. I would have liked to have bowed out on my own terms and maybe done a sort of a farewell race as people like to do, but so many people don't get to do that as well, because a lot of people do end their careers on injuries. It's just a sad fact, and you push your body as far as it can go. If I can, I would like to do the 6 majors, something like that.
That'd be brilliant.
I'm never going to run what I would call a quick time now. But if I can get close to 2 hours 30, something like that, I'd be very happy.
Soak up the experience and
exactly. At least run London, and just everyone says about the experience of London.
It's like you've got unfinished business with London anyway. So
I have. It would be nice to be on the elite start, but I might just squeeze a championship start now. I don't know.
They'll shout you out on BBC. I'm sure.
The old shot vest.
Looking back on all your career, is there a particular moment that stands out for you that is a highlight? Is there something you think that for me was the pinnacle? There must be so many, but is there something that your mind goes back to and thinks that really was when I felt the most successful, most elated at something?
2014 European Track Championship, silver medal in the 10K and bronze medal in the 5K.
Yep.
That probably was for me. That 4-day period was arguably the best, apart from the birth of my child. Probably the best 4 days of my life.
Andy, it's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. It's been marvellous to hear about your career. Irrespective of even how you feel about it, I, for one, can look on your career as one that's been very inspirational, and there's been a lot there to take a lot of motivation, inspiration from. I hope you're proud of the things that you've done, and it's been great to chat to you.
Thank you.
To support the videos and podcasts produced by Jog On, check out our website. This is jogon.com, where you can buy all the Jog On running kit, as well as our training plans, all of which have been carefully constructed with input from a GB athlete and a doctor of physiology, all to give you the best chance of getting the most from your running. Head to thisisjogon.com. Thank you. I'm Harry Morgan. Go for that run. And this is Jog On.